Comprehensions are an easy way of creating collections from other collections. So for example, we can create a new list from an old list in which every element is incremented by 2. And usually we would do that with a for loop. So we would create an empty list nums new, then loop through the old nums, and then we add to nums new the element plus 2. If you're wondering, this syntax achieves the same as append, but we're actually using the plus to extend our list with the new list containing element plus 2. So you can also use this syntax if you want to append multiple elements to the list. And just to be sure that it works, we can print our nums new. And there we have it. If we were to write a comment what this for loop does for us, we would write we want elem plus 2 for each elem in nums. And when we now turn our for loop into a list comprehension, you'll notice how similar it is to this comment here. So in general, comprehensions, or in this case, list comprehensions, are functionally equivalent to for loops. They're just faster to write and sometimes also easier to read. So we again start with our nums new, and then also write the syntax for an empty list. And then inside of this list, we write what we want. So we want elem plus 2 for each elem in nums. And now we can copy the print statement to check if it's the same. And yes, we get the same output. But now our code is shorter and also more readable. We can also combine our comprehensions with if and else. And this can serve two purposes. We can either use it to filter elements, or we can create conditions based on which we decide what we want to do with the element. So for the first purpose, the filtering, we write, for example, if the element is divisible by 2. So now our comprehension reads, we want the element plus 2 for each element in our numbers list, but only if the original element is divisible by 2. So if we now print this list, then we see that the uneven numbers are gone. Now to the second use case, where we want to change the output based on some conditions. And here the syntax can be a little bit confusing, because what we do is we move the if statement right after the element plus 2, and then we add an else statement. And so now the comprehension reads, we want the element plus 2 if the original element is divisible by 2, and else we do something else with the element. So for example, elem plus 100. And this gives us this output. So now the uneven numbers are incremented by 100. So again, if we want to filter based on some condition, we put that condition at the end. If we are not filtering any elements, but just changing them based on some conditions, then we put the condition where the actual change happens. And we also have to specify after the else what we're changing if the first condition is not met. Okay, so that was list comprehension. Next up we have set comprehension. And here the structure is the exact same, but instead of a list, we have a set. So we exchange some syntax. Instead of this syntax, so instead of appending, we add the new element. And also here we exchange the squared brackets with the curly brackets. So now we have the same thing, but with sets. Okay, finally we have dictionary comprehensions. And now that we are familiar with the comprehension syntax, we can jump straight to it. So we write a variable, and then an empty dictionary, and then we start with what we want. And in our example here, we want to create a dictionary where the keys are these numbers here, and the value is the boolean, whether these numbers are even or not. So the key will be a number, then we put a colon, like we do when we manually create dictionaries, then a space, and then our value. And so the value checks if the number is divisible by 2. And we want the number, and whether it's even or not, for every number in nums. And we can print our new dictionary. And we see that as keys we have our numbers, and the value indicates whether the key is an even number or an uneven number. We can also add the filter syntax again, so we can write if num is smaller than 5. So it will not add the key value pairs where our key or number is bigger or equal to 5. For the list and set comprehension, we created, for example, a new list based on an old list. So here we can of course also create dictionaries from old dictionaries. So let's say we have the dictionary new, and in this dictionary we want to convert the values to strings. So we want key and then the value as a string. and we want that for every key and value in. And now we have to be a little bit careful, because if we write just dict new, then you might remember from iterating through dictionaries, the syntax for element in dict new will just give us the keys. So we see here it just gives us the keys. And so since we want both keys and values, we write .items. And now if we print the new dictionary, so the new dictionary, then we see that we turned every value into a string. The other purpose of if and else was changing the elements based on some condition. And we can also do that for dictionaries. So let's say instead of the values being booleans, we want the actual word, so even or odd. And so we remove the boolean part here, and our value should be even if number is divisible by 2. And now else, we might want to write number as key and then odd, but this will not work. Because while we can change our values based on some condition, we cannot change the keys. So the keys are fixed in this first statement here. So of course we can have +1 or something, but we cannot attach it to some condition. So we write not the key, but just the value. And now we have a dictionary with the words even and odd matched with the respective numbers. And looking at this code here, you might argue that it's not that readable. And that brings up a good point, because we could even nest for loops in here, and then things can really get unreadable. So before you put 10 lines of code in one list comprehension, you should think about if it will still be readable. But once again, if we don't overdo it, it's really close to the English language. So let's read this comprehension once more. We want as keys our numbers, and the values should be the string even if our numbers are even, else we want the value to be odd, and we want these kind of key value pairs for every number in the nums list, if the numbers are smaller than 5.